story is...
I think the film just works brilliantly on so many levels.
Nick Broomfield, multi-award-winning documentary director of Eileen Wuornos, The Selling of a Serial Killer, Kurt and Courtney, and the forthcoming Battle for Haditha.
I love the whole idea of that this is a man writing about the complexities of a relationship between a man and a woman.
Archie Panjabi, winner of the Breakthrough Performance Award at the Cannes Film Festival for her role in A Mighty Heart. She's also featured in East is East, Bend It Like Beckham, and The Constant Gardener.
I felt it was kind of in the service of a story that I was over familiar with.
And Christopher Eccleston, a TV star thanks to Our Friends in the North, Doctor Who and Heroes, he's acted in numerous feature films such as Shallow Grave, The Others and Elizabeth.
I absolutely adored this film. I was a bit unsure at the start, you know, moving in and out of these both worlds, the fantasy world and the real world. But I quite like the way he uses the fantasy world as a metaphor to what's happening in the real world, because you're in, 1944, in the aftermath of the Spanish Civil War. And I love the parallels between both of them. The one that sticks to mind is the toad, that great big hideous toad that kind of regurgitates itself, is not really that dissimilar to the men in the real world, you know, Captain Vidal and his men. So I loved it. Technically, I thought it was absolutely stunning. But it's also, there were so many layers to the film. I felt watching it once wasn't enough. It's the kind of film I'd want to watch 3 or 4 times to really get into it.
There's no faulting the design of the film, I think. It certainly has a unique vision which is carried on throughout. What about the performances? Do you think that it's possible for actors and performers to match that kind of backdrop? What do you think of the actors and their work in this particular movie?
The central villain in the piece, I thought was absolutely fantastic, because, I mean, we actually have a shot of him. I think he shoots 2 children point blank, and he still manages to hold your attention. And to a certain extent, that backstory of the father and the broken watch, your sympathy in some way. But what he definitely kept was complexity. I thought it was a fantastic performance. I mean, I've tried villains, and you know, that for me is the way to do it. I thought he was brilliant.
What about the youngster, the girl's performance, though? Because that's a difficult...
I thought she was because I actually think, I mean, he's a great actor, fantastic actor, but his character doesn't go anywhere. From the first moment you see him when he's complaining about them being 15 minutes late, and he's completely unsympathetic to his wife, who's pregnant and shouldn't have travelled. You hate him. And you just stay hating him for the entire film. You don't learn anything about him that changes that. He's just a pig. I mean, the power of the film was the vision of it, really, and she, I think, was amazing.
She was magnificent.
I thought her performance was
she's 11 years
incredible.
old, and to think, you know, to put this in perspective, if you think of the magical fantasy world, there's probably human beings running around with big puppets, and she has to give such a natural reaction to that.
It's not diminishing it, saying magical fantasy, of course, but do you think there's more to it? Is it allegorical? Do you think it's a comment on Spain, the transition from, you know, the wartime regime to post-war fascism? Is that what we're meant to be taking away from it? Was it clear to you what he was trying to say, in short?
Yes, it was clear to me, and I thought it was very allegorical, and I thought the idea at the end where he seems to be you know, the faun tricks her, attempts to trick her, and basically seems to say a very powerful thing, is if you're going to sacrifice anything to change things, make sure it's yourself. I thought was very powerful. I like the film. I like the technical credits, you know, the cinematography, the sound, the use of sound, but I felt it was kind of in the service of a story that I was over familiar with, quite a conventional one. Male existential angst, inability to commit to a woman, and I found it quite hard work.
So beautifully made, but perhaps serving something which you felt was overly familiar.
I found myself in the first 5 or 10 minutes hoping we were going to follow the woman, because as a guy going to the cinema, I'm so used to following men. You know, how's a woman going to deal with a breakup sexually, socially, spiritually? You know, I felt I was on very familiar ground. Perhaps it's my life.
Maybe, well, maybe also it's he's the director, he's the actor as well.
And I felt there was a slight self-importance to all that, and a solemnity.
Who knows? That might have caused more rows at home. Her saying, "Why didn't you follow my side of the story?" Were you convinced by the disintegration of the relationship itself, the way the story arcs played out throughout the film?
Yeah, I was. I thought what was amazing about the way he shot it was that it was shot in real time. It wasn't scenes with lots of cuts. You really got those amazing kind of pregnant pauses between the couple, which was so awkward sometimes. And I thought some of his cinematography was brilliant. The way you know, for example, when he comes off the beach and you see this figure across her face when she's sunbathing lying there. And then he comes closer and closer, and then it goes into her dream where she thinks she's being strangled, covered in sand with him. I thought that some of those shots were quite brilliant and quite exceptional.
Beautifully shot.
And and the scenes were almost one shot. I thought those things were fantastic. I think the thing that I stopped believing was actually the other woman that he fancied. I don't know if his wife had a part in the casting of her, but I thought she was so unattractive.
See, I really liked her.
You did?
I loved her performance.
I love the whole idea that the climates around takes you to different beautiful sceneries, but also the way in which it reflects the different emotions that the characters are going through. And on a deeper level, in a way, you feel that that nature, the seasons have a certain pattern and they're so predictable, and yet as human beings we're so complex and so unpredictable. I loved the whole idea of that this is a man writing about the complexities of a relationship between a man and a woman. And at times I kind of felt he was sitting there, angled the camera in a certain way, jumped over to the other side and, started filming. It's three men on the table, so I don't know how you feel about it.
So it felt very true to you?
I felt it did, yeah. And I loved the long shots and the long silences, and you were left to kind of sit there watching and trying to understand what was going on in their thoughts.
Ulrich Mühr's performance in the central role has quite rightly been talked about very highly. Very repressed, quite distant from the action. What did you make of the film as a whole and of his performance specifically?
I thought his performance was fantastic. I felt that the director was more interested in that character than other characters. I felt other characters, the artist and the actress, the writer and the actress suffered. I felt they were more two-dimensional. But the portrayal of that role internally by the actor and externally by the director, and the design, the photography, the world of that man and his journey was just fantastic. It's a great political thriller, I thought. Yeah. A great thriller.
There was some statistic that 1 in 50 people in East Germany were employed by the Stasi, which is incredible. And I think what comes over in this film is just how pervasive they are, and how a guy can't even crack a joke in the canteen.
Brilliant scene.
Isn't it?
Terrifying.
Without ending up steaming envelopes at the end of the film. And so I think the film just works brilliantly on so many levels. And I think, one of the things you see is this sort of devoted socialist at the beginning of the film, realizing that the system is corrupt and that he can't really support it anymore. He sees that through his old schoolmate, who's now doing much better than him, and through the corruption of the relationship between the minister and the actress, he realizes he can't support it anymore. And then I think that the real pivotal moment is really when that piano sonata is played, and he's listening to, it's a Beethoven sonata, and apparently it was the inspiration of the film, which is this comment that Lenin made, that when he heard this particular Beethoven sonata, he forgot about the revolution, and he realized he
wanted to stroke people's heads.
He wanted, instead of smashing them in.
Yeah.
And what happens in the film is that he listens to this sonata, and you see a tear coming down his face. And he's gone to the other side.
I love the film. I mean, it is a fantastic story. The subject matter is incredibly interesting. It makes a great political thriller, but for me, it was the human aspect of watching this sort of colourless, soulless, grey man living in his room, squeezing food from a little tube, and gradually changing as he listens in on the lives of the actor and the writer. And I thought he made that transition so complex and so subtle through his performance, which was just amazing. Yeah. Sometimes he didn't even move his eyes. He didn't make any movements.
Ein Spiegelredakteur hat am 7. Welcome back to another episode of Télévision Éducative. Tonight...
When I first watched this film, like I said, I didn't know what to make of it and I wanted to switch it off, but within the first 5-10 minutes of it, the fact that it was so weird and odd actually appealed to me. And I think if you can't ask too many questions about the film or make sense of their relationship, or why he's having these dreams. Is it because of the loss of his father, or he wants to be closer to his mum? Once you stop asking the questions and you realise in his mind and in his dream all these possibilities exist, you can just sit back and enjoy it. And I mean, it was weird but entertaining.
I found aspects of it really quite childish and quite indulgent, and then moments of absolute brilliance. But for the first half I was struggling. I liked the film when it darkened. There's a scene where he is in his dream and he follows his dream and suddenly he's in the corridor naked, confronted with this woman he loves, and you think he's actually becoming he could be becoming a danger to himself or to her. And I liked that because I had something to hold on to. I loved the cut and paste animation. I really enjoyed that because I get kind of turned off by the completeness of CGI, and I found that really magical. I think he'll make a great film. I don't think this was a great film.
Yeah, he's a genius, his effects and the look of the film. I mean, I think he's probably the most amazing director in terms of what he can do with the camera and the effects he can create. And I think some of the videos, the music videos he's done, like the Stones one stuff, are just totally brilliant. Whereas I loved the previous film he did, is it Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind?
Charlie Kaufman
the Charlie Kaufman script.
He scripted this one, whereas that was...
Exactly. And I felt that film worked because you kind of knew when you were in reality and when you were in another world, and you knew why you were going through it. You knew that he was exercising all these things. Whereas in this film, I just felt the guys in his office, for example, were so weird. I couldn't tell whether sometimes they were part of his fantasy or whether they were real, or I just had a real problem myself separating what was real and what wasn't real. And then his kind of his wonderful effects were wasted on me because I kind of was fighting for some kind of structure.
Apichatpong obviously is an unorthodox director. I mean, the long takes, few close-ups. Does it work for you, that style?
I think that the film is very poetic, and I loved the visual quality of the film, particularly in the first part of the film, when we were in the hospital and there was that sort of amazing, lush, tropical vegetation. And there's that incredible shot early on where we go out of into the corridor with a character and then end up in some fields. And I felt his use of the camera was very original. But I had a problem with the structure in the film. I had a problem actually staying in the film. Although I felt there were some wonderful moments in it, like where the dentist sings to the monk. Yeah. And there were wonderful moments like you see the vulnerability of the monks, and the monks have rashes and itches, and they have dreams about chickens chasing them around and so on. And there's a wonderful humanity to the film. I didn't really get the underlying intention, which is, I guess, is more a film to do with reincarnation. It's a film to do with one's karma, and it's to do with the karma of his parents and the way he's ingested that karma and the way in which that karma will go to producing a moment of happiness, I think that was the intention behind the film, which I certainly didn't get.
Personally, I thought the performances were very good. They're very natural. They're very believable. I just didn't buy into any of them. And a lot of the time, the shots were like one angle, as though the camera was being a third eye, looking in on these different people that they both meet, patients and colleagues. But a lot of the time, you just saw the back of the head. So I so wanted him to close in, make a tight shot so I could see the way the dialogue was delivered. There were some lovely pieces. For example, the woman who takes the bottle of alcohol out of the prosthetic leg. There were some really lovely moments, and I really wanted to like it because it was very sweet, and there was a certain lovely slow pace about the film, but I just couldn't.
And what about the kind of the switch, the fact that you see essentially the same story twice, but with slightly different dialogue? I mean, that's an unusual device. just putting it mildly.
I was absolutely fascinated and compelled by the film. I had no idea what was going on, and partly that's why I stayed with it in a sense. I did think the performances were brilliant, actually, like Loachian, unaffected. And I think because I'm so used to seeing busy video, use of camera, I really liked the locked-off shots and the very considered close-ups. I really enjoyed the film. I ended up having dreams after watching the film. Like, you know, it invaded me in a way.
Chickens?
Yeah, chickens were all around my bedroom. But to answer your question, the second half, the repetition, did get wearing.
Morning, sir.